Welcome to Jesus. Alexander Ship. Film star Andrew Garfield. And an unknown making his cinematic director. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming out for this wonderful movie that you made.
Thank you. I broke my chair immediately.
We're off to a great start. Let's jump right into it. You credit Jonathan Larson as the man who inspired you to write musicals, so it's understandable you'd be drawn to the story. But why as a movie? What drew you to this story as a movie?
A couple of things. Yes, Jonathan Larson is the reason I'm sitting here and I get to talk to you. I saw Rent in the last row of the Nederlander Theater on my 17th birthday with my high school girlfriend, and I've never felt more personally attacked by a show in my life. All I wanted to do when I grew up was make movies and write songs, and here are the main two characters worrying about making movies and writing songs, using their camera to spar and using their guitar, to quote the show. And it was the most diverse cast I'd ever seen on Broadway. It felt homemade, and it had details in it that just felt real and contemporary. I couldn't believe I was hearing a Café Bustelo reference in a musical, and it was a loving portrait of John's friends and community, and it was the show that made me want to write musicals. That made me feel like I could write a musical because this was obviously so personal to its creator. And then like smash cut to, I'm a senior at Wesleyan, I'm a theater major. It's the month after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, and I'm going to see Jonathan Larson's earlier, now posthumous musical, Tick, Tick, Boom. And it felt, I have no idea what anyone else in that theater experienced. I felt a message in a bottle from Jonathan Larson. The brilliant Raul Esparza played him in that original production. And it was like, oh, so you want to write musicals. It's harder than you think. That nice young lady sitting next to you who's such a great actress is going to grow up and get a real job. All of your friends who you think are more talented than you are going to get real jobs. And you're going to be the only one banging your head against your childhood dream. And everyone else is going to grow up. And if you want to do this, it's worth it. But it's going to be really hard. It was like a sneak, and I was 21 years old, and I was staring down what my 20s would look like, and it ended up being what my 20s did look like. Doing the jobs you have to do so you can do the job you love to do. It was a sneak preview of my 20s from the person who got me started down this road in the first place. So when the great Julie O approached me, yes! and said she had the film rights, I said, I'm the only person who can direct this movie. And I know I've never directed a movie before, but I am the only person who can direct it because I've lived every ounce of it, and I understand it.
So how did you find directing a movie? Was it daunting?
It was interesting. I knew what I knew about Jonathan's life, and we did an immense amount of research and interviewed his friends and his family and his collaborators he burned bridges with to get the fullest possible sense of him. And then I just hired smarter, more talented people at every other stage of the journey. I saw Andrew in Angels in America. That's a 6-hour play in 2 parts, and he was so fearless and vulnerable and theatrical and shattering. I just left feeling like that guy can do anything, and that's Jonathan Larson. And I didn't know if he could sing, but I knew he could do anything. And so that's, and then we kind of were off to the races after I talked him into this crazy scheme.
So Andrew, talk about this crazy scheme a little bit. I mean, let's start with the preparation for this part, which I think shows a pretty magnificent performance. Can you just give us an overview of what you had to put into this film, for the singing, for the piano, for the emotional component? It's such a tour de force, and I imagine it was not easy.
Well, first of all, I'm thinking about your guys' response to John and to us, and it makes perfect sense because he is us, right? He is us. Everyone in this room is John. We are all going through and have been through a version of what John has been through. So it's our story, and I can feel that now, and I felt it in your response as we came out. So thank you so much for welcoming us in that way. And secondly, just the surreal nature of that. This experience that Lin didn't have to convince me into. My friend said, Lin wants to meet with you, and I immediately said, tell him yes to whatever it is. Because of who he is as an elemental creative force in the world. So then the fact that we got to do this over the course of, how long has it been, 2.5 years? Yeah, including the break for COVID and all the rest, and that we got to come back as a company that just missed and loved each other and were longing to be in the same room together again. And during a pandemic, no less, there were so many synchronicities, serendipitous things, but the fact that we get to now present it and have people love it it almost feels too lucky. It almost feels too fortunate, because doing it was beyond enough. It was icing on top of icing on top of icing, and now to be able to share it with people. First, I'm just very deeply moved by your guys' response. I just wanted to address that, and I'm just so grateful for that, because I would do this without an audience, but to work on this with you and with everyone here, and to try to honor John. And that's what my preparation was. It was always the North Star, was John, his spirit, his essence. And me and Lynn have been talking about it recently. We've all been talking about it. There's prep, and there's so much footage of John. There's him doing Boho Days, the solo show. There's countless images and home movie footage that we got access to through his sister and his best friends. There was his tape cassette collection that gave so many clues. There was the books on his bookshelf with lots of Neruda. There was so many clues, just so much to kind of pick and choose from and then steep yourself in. But then at the end of the day, when we got on set, we tried to carve a hole in the ceiling of every single set, metaphorically, to let spirit come in, to let John's spirit be that other thing that was the only way that we could tell his story. And yeah, it's mystical, but what we do is mystical, and we all know that there's something about meeting the moment. There's something about the pure presence of the heart, the body, the voice, and all of our souls intermingling and calling in the soul of John, which is so alive and kicking, not just because we get to keep spreading his ripples through this film, but just because he's the power that he's left behind, the energy that he's left behind is there for us whenever we want it, whenever we want to can join with it and commune with it. So there was a spiritual element that was very, very beautiful, that was symbolized by Julie, his sister, and his surviving sister that was there on set a lot of the days. And whenever we needed any kind of guidance, we would just look at her and go, okay, we know what we need to do. There was something very soulful about that.
It's a very, at times, warts and all portrait of Jonathan, and I think one of the things I really love about this depiction is you see a full human being, and there's so much life and energy to the whole film and your portrayal. In terms of keying into his personality, were there parts of him that you found that maybe surprised you, or that guided you a little bit in the piece?
I mean, he was obviously so multifaceted and translucent with his skin, like, and wearing his heart not just on his sleeve, but it was coming out of his whole throat. It was coming out of every cell. He was someone who lived, turned up to an 11 all the time. He that intensity of wanting to be in life, and it's something that me and Lynn talked about a lot, which was what is the ticking, right? And how he's interpreting it is, am I turning 30? Is that what it is? I haven't achieved anything, or is it this relationship that feels like the one true love, and is time running out there, a biological clock, or whatever. These are the things that he's thinking about. But I think the ticking for me, the thing that we really wanted to kind of keep in our unconscious was that, obviously what we know is that John did pass away at a very, very tragically young age. So for me, what that urgency was, that ticking was an unconscious knowing that he only had a certain amount of time to sing his song, to get his song sung as much as possible. And we all leave this earth with a half-finished or a three-quarters finished song. We're not ever gonna complete that, and that's something kind of poetic and beautiful about that. And I think he had a real understanding of that, and he was literally experiencing it with all of his friends, a lot of his friends getting sick and dying around him. There was a physical awareness of that, but also I think there was a bone-deep, unconscious knowing that time actually was running out. He wasn't just an indulgent artist that wanted to get his stuff made. He knew he had something to say. He knew he had something to give to the world before he was taken. I think that's my impression anyway.
We have a phenomenal cast up here, and one of the real strengths of this film is the way each character really gets a moment and really gets to shine. Alexander, for you, can you talk a little bit about working with Andrew 1, because I think that the dynamic between your characters is so rich and complicated, but also finding, particularly in that really heartbreaking final scene, your own voice in this film and occupying your own space.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about working with Andrew is how easy it is to kind of slide into the energy that we were able to establish, but also it was something that we worked on with Lin, right? Like when you see people who are in love, they have a language about them that translates not only when they're in those sweet moments, but also when they're fighting. And we wanted to be able to kind of show that regardless of where they were at, there was still that core basis of love and respect. And towards the end with Susan, she had to really make that decision. Yes, she wants to be with Jonathan, but she also needs to love herself just as much. And that meant following her own dream. And when you love someone so much, you have to let them go and let them have their love, have their life, have their art. That's what real love is. And the fact that they were able to do that for each other just proves how in love they actually were. Because if Jonathan didn't love her, he'd be like, just stay. And that never works out. It really doesn't. He said go, and she said cool, you go too. And there was this parting that I just loved diving into with Andrew, because it felt like I wasn't Alex, and it felt like you weren't Andrew. It felt like we at moments were channeling this energy that took me outside of my body and put Susan in here,
Robin, you have made me cry both times I've watched this film, particularly. And you've also had worked with Lynn for a long time now. what was it like for you working with him again as a director now? How did you find the shift working with him for the screen?
Yeah, it was really healing. I think, oh, don't get me crying already. You know we've been through some shit together. We've all been crying all day. You know, I think I discovered my neuroses the first time I worked with Lin. I don't mean that because that was like the first time I felt respect from my community. Ooh. And I just heard you. And in that respect, there was a discovery of my ego and a conflict with my ego and my creativity that I've been navigating for a long time. And then coming to this project and working with Lin and working with someone who centers joy and who centers a fun space and who centers the collective, it's like there were these moments of me seeing my ego and me seeing the crazy. I was having mini panic attacks during the early part of the filmmaking process. And there was one specific day where I could see in Lin's face that he was like, "You're crazy, that was a good scene." And I got to the point where I literally thought the crew wasn't looking me in the eye. Like I was just like bullying myself. And I went to my trailer, and it was the day that they announced that Biden won the election, and Van Jones was crying about the fact that there was such a proximity in the election and what that meant, that, you know, half of the country was probably racist as fuck. And I looked at the TV, and I thought, now that's real. That's actually a problem. What I have is privilege. I come from a world where my parents didn't get to finish high school, where they worked in factories, where my mom was a domestic the last few years before she retired. And like, now I'm number 2 on the call sheet after you, working with you and Steven, working with all of you guys. And the fact that I would indulge my ego and choose drama, like that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And I was like, but I think that I don't think it's a coincidence that when we had this shared experience early on, like this thing showed up, and then now we reunite, and with you I get to heal that. And I also think that the fact that you're my Puerto Rican brother is like, it's the ancestors coming through, you know?
It's so funny you say that because I'm thinking about all of our times in the bodega on that stage where we were in the show together, and you were always the person to make me laugh and to make me like drop out of whatever was in my head. Like anytime someone fucked up in heads, whether it was someone messing up a line or like we have a sub trumpet player and they just don't have it. You hear like wah, 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 and Robin would turn to me without fail. This happens several nights a week. You go, "Papa, they think you wrote that." Never failed to make me laugh and like shrug off whatever had gone wrong and keep going. I had to humble you. You succeeded.
I'll call that. I'll turn to Vanessa now. Between Rent and this, I think you've given 2 pretty beautiful performances of Jonathan Larson productions. I'm wondering what about his work speaks to you as a performer and what it brings out of you.
There's so much. I mean, I feel like community to him was everything, you know, and a lot of his community was people of the LGBTQ community. And he made sure that their stories were front and center, and it was a through line in all of his work. And representation is so important. And the fact that he was like writing this at a time where that was not acceptable, that was not seen in a positive light. And I look at like my circle of friends and my LGBT community, and
how much they inspire me, and how they make me feel so alive, and I feel so safe with this group of people, and how I would not be the person that I am if it wasn't for them. And so I feel like that love for our community is very deep within us both. But he's just this trailblazer, you know? Like, he's just following his own heart, his own beat, creating new sounds, telling the stories that weren't being told that needed to be and still need to be. And the fact that he's also like kind of a prophet, you know? Like, he called out so many things, like in Suburbia, the whole like device about like how people would just show their lives and it would almost make them celebrities. I was like, homeboy was talking about social media.
There's even a part we cut where he had these things called empty translators, and they were supposed to break on purpose so that you would always have to buy when you're home. I don't know if that feels familiar to you. That's all real, that's all inspiration.
How could you not be a fan, you know? And I feel so honored and so humble, and I'm just so full of so much emotion today coming off of last night, but like just being shoulder to shoulder with these guys and telling the story that we're able to tell. I feel like that is something that like I would love to be remembered for, you know? Like a community of love. And that's the thing that like matters the most to me.
Joshua, what about for you? You're someone with a lot of great stage credits, and coming into this and telling this story and surrounded by so many greats, and I'm going to ask you about some of those cameos in a minute, but being involved in this project, what was that like for you?
Well, like so many artists, like I really needed it. I really needed that in fall of last year, to be surrounded with family, familiar faces, people I've worked with since 2006. And the really cool thing about this process was this story, Tick Tick Boom, is about healing. Being able to use your gift to bring healing to your community at a time when they need it, at a time when 99% of actors and artists are out of work, felt very, was a huge responsibility. And as much fun as I had doing this film, much fun. But I was very aware of that. And I feel like just like Jonathan was aware of how much time he had, you know, to get this message out. You know, there were times when in this film we didn't know if we were going to see the ending of it. You know, there were so many ways it could have gotten derailed, but I was aware that I got to use my gift to provide healing to my community, and the way that I feel the most useful, and that's being on stage and singing. So for me, it's healing, and it was also a very purposeful moment that made me feel like this is the meaning of my life right now, and that feels so good to do that among people that you love and respect.
And Judith, I would call your performance in this film a masterclass in scene stealing.
That's Lynn's fault.
I do blame Lynn. I'll just start. How did you do it? What was your inspiration for this character? How did you make so much and just a handful of scenes there?
That was Lynn's fault too. It's all there on the page. It really is. I mean, this is an extraordinarily active script, and some of it was rewritten from the original Tick Tick Boom by Stephen Levinson. And so there's a lot that was there, but also Lynn gave me a lot of information about Rosa Stevens, who was Stephen Sondheim's actual agent. And I remember this one day, and it was the first day that I was working, and I was working with Andrew. And you know, one of the things that everybody's talking about is the kind of connection that there's that opening in the ceiling for Jonathan to come through, and you can feel the sense of spirit with everybody. We were on cell phones doing a scene because it was COVID time, and it was pretty much the height of the pandemic, and it was back in, I think, of October or November of last year. And
Was this the scene you were acting at your house?
that's right, I was in my apartment in New York.
And she was
On
doing
the
the other
phone.
end of the phone line at her house for Andrew.
Right. And Andrew was on the phone on the set with you, and you were directing us on your cell phone.
I was texting you.
Texting us, telling us what to do. And all I can tell you is that the connection was so strong, and I'm not talking about the phone connection. It was so powerful that it was as though there was no, it was as though we were both on the same set doing the phone call, which we normally would have been at another time. So what I would say to you is that the whole energy of everything is what really gave me the sense of her. And there's something about being of service in any piece that you do, that it is your, I think, your job and your responsibility, some of what you were talking about, that you bring to that what you are there to serve. And for Jonathan Larson, that relationship with his agent was one that was very conflicted and very fraught and very needy. And there was this one moment at the end when Rose is giving him the information, and Lynn said to me, pick up the phone at that moment. That pick up the phone. And that changed everything. So you never do it alone. You're always doing it with everybody and with the energy of everyone. And I would also say that Lynn listens and hears and respects. And that was so for Andrew and everybody else in the entire dynamic. And that's very rare. And that feeds you as an artist and what you're there to do and what you're there to bring. You're there to give. You're not there to take. And the other thing I would say is off of what you said, Lynn, about the message in the bottle. It's as though this message from Jonathan Larson has been floating in a bottle on the ocean. And it finally came to shore in this production. And I think it's going to carry a universal message for a lot of people, because I was around at the time of the early days of AIDS, and what Robin brings to the story of what was Jonathan's time, and what does it mean to us now all living within the structure of a pandemic. And I cannot avoid thinking about the metaphor of Jonathan's heart and having an aortic aneurysm, that the title of this film is Tick, Tick, Boom. And I just find that so stunning. And so those are some of my thoughts about it.
Jess is in the film more than we could ask for. There's one number I want to ask about before we wrap, and that is the Sunday number, which is.
So put your phones down for this part of the film.
Good disclaimer. Probably like the most joy I've had in a movie theater. Seeing in this crowd the gasps of joy every 5 seconds. Just delightful.
I honestly wish I could teleport to every place while Sunday is playing.
Can you just tell me a little bit about how you assembled that, where the idea to stage it that way came from, the most surprising thing maybe that came to you and all that?
I'm gonna go all the way deep on it because we have a bunch of artists in this room. First of all, the song Sunday is Jonathan's loving homage / Weird Al parody of one of the greatest Act 1 closing number of all time, Sunday from Sunday in the Park with George. And in that musical, George Surratt is hearing a frenzy, a cacophony of voices, and he finally goes freeze. And he assembles the company into a tableau, and that is his masterpiece. And Jonathan took that moment and wrote it about the most stressful moment in his life, Sunday brunch at the Moondance Diner. And the lyrics are funny, and Jonathan only ever performed it as a one-man band with his rock band and sometimes Roger Bart singing backup. And so what I wanted to do was create, I said, oh my God, we're gonna actually have a company be able to sing this. Jonathan never heard it as a company. Let's get the fucking company of Jonathan Larson's dreams. And so I called every alum from every Sondheim show. And then I thought that wasn't enough. You also, some backstory to this. I'm that nerd who was at the Ziegfeld at midnight for Chicago when it first opened, and I'm that nerd whose heart fell out of his chest when Cheetah Rivera showed up in the prison in that one cameo, and my mission for this was 20 Cheetah Riveras. That times 20. And so again, I called all the folks and explained the spirit of we're making the chorus of Jonathan Larson's dreams, beginning with, of course, and your phones are off, right? Yeah. Beginning, of course, with Bernadette Peters, she's got in the original Sunday in Park with George, and without her, the whole thing doesn't work. She's the reveal, she's the prestige, and then I also was inspired by, and again, I'm revealing myself as a nerd in every layer of the story, but I was the guy who had like the poster of like Amy Winehouse next to Marilyn Monroe, next to Brandon Lee, in the Gone Too Soon Moondance of the Star, and I wanted this to feel outside of time, and so I called Beth Malone, who played the lead in Fun Home, one of the great modern musicals, and I grabbed 2 out of the 3 Schuyler sisters, and I grabbed the great Andre DeShields, who was in a musical once a decade. That guy was the Wiz in The Wizard of Oz, and now he's killing it as Hermes in Hadestown. It's absolutely insane. And so, you know, those were my well-laid plans, and then God laughed at those plans, and we had a pandemic. And then I realized we're gonna have to film this under COVID restrictions. And it was, you know, these are legends, and they couldn't all commit to 14 days quarantine before doing this. So we had extra layers of, okay, who's quarantined for 5 days, who's quarantined for 12 days, filming these people 6 feet apart from each other in some cases. Joel Grey just wants to hug everyone, and we're like, no, Joel, we need to keep you alive. This is just the best. And then of course, you know, the other sort of final thing is this original members of the company of Rent, who we know Jonathan hasn't met yet, but they still get to be in this number because this is the chorus of Jonathan Larson's dreams, and it exists outside of time. And then the final touch was I hired Michael Starobin, who arranged Someday in the Park with George, to orchestrate this number. Getting the wall down and all that shit, but you're not doing that.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. But for about 5 more numbers. But thank you all so much.